Well, it's 2012, and this year marks Mega Man's 25th anniversary. So what better way to start off this year by listing off my top 10 games in the Mega Man franchise.
At number 10, we have Mega Man 5. This was the first Mega Man game that I played, so it takes a number 10 spot for introducing me to the series. I rented this game back then, and I got extremely frustrated with it, because I got blocked in an area that I needed to slide in, which was a technique I didn't know how to perform.
That was actually one of the problems renting video games back then. You rarely ever got the instruction manual because people wouldn't return it. But even though I didn't have it, I still enjoyed this game.
Number 9, Mega Man Battle Network. Now this was a drastic turn for Mega Man, but it was a nice break from the norm. It's an RPG set in an alternate timeline where computer technology and networking was chosen over robotics.
In fact, the technology in this game is actually pretty close to what we have today, although we just don't have net navies and battle chips.
I thought that the gameplay was done really well, where you had to switch between Land and Mega Man to accomplish certain tasks, and the combat was great and implored strategy over everything else. Number 8, Mega Man X Command Mission. As Battle Network was a drastic turn for the Mega Man series, Command Mission was the same for the X series. Command Mission was more on par with traditional turn-based RPG combat, and the redesign of X is really badass, and for an RPG, it had probably some of the most challenging boss fights I've ever seen, especially Mach Gentra. That fight was a pain in the ass. Command Mission takes place 100 years after the X series and 100 years before the Zero series, making it the last game in the X series if you go in chronological order.
And the story is actually pretty different for an X game. Basically, it's a gold rush, and the Maverick Hunters get swept up in a rebellion taking over the city, which is something you wouldn't expect them to do. So it actually gets a lot of points for breaking the usual X storyline.
Number 7, Mega Man Legends. Legends seemed to be the right direction for Mega Man at the time of its release, as most games have shifted away from 2D side-scrollers to full 3D roamers. The Legends series takes place at the end of the Mega Man timeline, where humans have become extinct, and the race that dominates the planet are artificial humans called Carbons. And the entire planet is covered in water, leaving people to live on islands.
It has open-ended gameplay, allowing you to search every inch of the island, and the story is pretty compelling too, as it keeps you going so you can figure out what's going on.
Number 6, Mega Man X3. Mega Man X3 felt more rewarding than X2, and you could play as Zero, although it was pretty limited. And the armor looked pretty badass, especially when you got the gold hyper version of it. In the story, there's a cure for the Maverick virus, but it turns out to be a placebo.
There was also Saturn and PlayStation versions, which Americans would not get until Mega Man X Collection was released.
The music and sound effects were much better, and it's the only game to have animated intros for the Mavericks, and it's something that would be nice to see again. Number 5, Mega Man 2.
Well, yes, the first Mega Man game was awesome. It wasn't until Mega Man 2 that set the standard for all subsequent games that would come after it.
Starting the game with an intro scene, title screen music, 8 bosses instead of 6, and a password system. Capcom really hit the nail on the head with this title. Number 4, Mega Man 8. Capcom poured a lot of love into this game. Animated cutscenes, hand-drawn sprites, giving the animation a really nice flow to it.
And this game leads into the X series in a very subtle way. The evil energy that the character Duo is after would actually become the Maverick virus that Zero would become a carrier of.
Number 3, Mega Man X4. If you look at the X series as a whole, the first 3 were about X, 7 and 8 were about Axel, and 4, 5, and 6 were about Zero. And this was the game where everyone found out that Zero was made by Dr. Wily.
I know that Mega Man The Power Fighters 2 came out a year before, and that it detailed that Zero was created by Dr. Wily. However, that was an arcade release, so it wasn't as easily available as Mega Man X4.
X and Zero had their own different story, and you learned that Zero was a Maverick that hid out in one of Wily's old labs. X's game was pretty easy as you could blow through it with no issue. Zero's game was much harder, mainly due to the close range required to fight the Mavericks. Although the story isn't really that coherent, as X and Zero's stories conflict with each other, so it's not really sure which one is canon. But I'm gonna say that Zero's story is canon. Number 2, Mega Man X8. When you look at the disaster that was X7, anything would probably be met with open arms, and not only did you welcome X8, you made sweet love to it. This fixed everything wrong with X7. It brought back the ultimate armor and had X playable from the start.
And the story takes a pretty disturbing twist when you get to the final battle.
There's a series of new generation Riploids that are immune to the Maverick virus, but because they have Sigma's DNA, they can go Maverick at will. And this game marks the end of Sigma as the main bad guy, as Lumine says that Sigma is dead and not coming back. It ends on a cliffhanger that's never answered. Axel gets severely wounded by Lumine and a piece of him gets lodged in Axel, leaving an ambiguous ending of what happens now, with the only answer being that they're gonna keep on fighting. And taking the number 1 spot is Mega Man Maverick Hunter X.
What can be better than Mega Man X1? A badass remake of Mega Man X1.
The story did stray a little from the original, but they did it to tell a better and more developed story. It's sad that this game didn't sell as well as it should have, because Capcom was actually planning to remake X2 through 6 if Maverick Hunter sold well. The game did get positive reviews, however, but I don't think they put that much marketing into the game, and making it portable probably hurt it as well. But it's an amazing reimagining of the first X game, and including a movie that showed how it all started. Plus you got to play as Vile and get the game from a villain's perspective. Although Vile's story is technically a what-if scenario. But in my opinion, this is the best Mega Man game in the franchise.
And that's my top 10 best Mega Man games. Now if you want to see my top 10 worst Mega Man games, here it is. Oh, that's not a joke. I really hate that game.